Welcome to another edition of Council Countdown. I'm the host for today, Chloe G, and alongside me, I'm here with Joseph Passman. So today you have a long lineup of meetings today at 1, 3, and 5.
Correct.
But before we get into that, you tell me that there was a conference this
trying
weekend
to ask how to do that.
You'd like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, Chloe. On the 20th and the 21st, several individuals, 9 to be exact, from Beaufort County, we were the most represented county there at the conference, went to Columbia to take classes, to learn about what our state legislators are thinking about for budgetary purposes, and even got to meet with some of our delegation to go over lots of things. So I want to give a shout out to those people who went from county council. We had Paula Brown, David Bartholomew, Tab Tabernick went, Tom Reeds went, Alice Howard went, and I went. And it was a great time had by all, wonderful opportunities. So I wanted to give a shout out to those people, as well as our county administrator and Jared Frelick also, and Hank Amundsen were also in attendance. So of the 34 counties represented, we had the most people there.
These are all the ones I either want to
Now,
drop or also.
upcoming on our council meetings today, we have 3 of them. So there's a lot of things that are going on, but one of the things that is not going to happen that some people may think about is we're not going to have the 3rd reading of the referendum. We have some work to do before that happens, and so we won't be taking that up at this
It makes
meeting.
perfect sense to me, but as I
Not
said
going to be
Brian,
reading
No,
the
it's not going to be the 3rd reading until we meet with our municipal leaders, and we're going to have various sessions around the county, information sessions, so that we can tell the public exactly what is going to be on this referendum. So everybody should stay tuned for that.
Yes, so write that down. We're not going to be getting to see that. Is there anything specific to this finance meeting that's about to start here in 10 minutes?
Well, we're going to take up ATAS, so that's an important topic. So everybody should be aware of that. It'll be explained. We're going to talk about the changes that the state legislature has made and what changes we made.
Jumping a little bit back and forth, back to the conference. How did it feel really whenever you got there and realized that you guys were that Beaufort is the most well represented?
Well, that's pretty good. You know, Beaufort County is well received at these conferences because we do want to have classes. We want to be the best we can possibly be. So it's a great opportunity for us.
I think it's awesome that you guys want to go out of your way to be even better for.
Well, you know, it's a 2-hour drive to Columbia, so, you know, we're taking time out of our careers that we have, because a lot of these people work, and they take time off to go and do what they have to do to be the best council person they can be, so that's good.
And as a citizen, and I'm sure others out there watching, as a citizen, I mean, that is exactly what you want to hear. So, yeah, it's awesome. Is there anything else you would like to mention prior to this meeting?
No, I think, you know, the meeting will speak for itself. Got a lot of work to do.
That's the problem.
We'll get to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to come on. And, yeah, good luck.
Anytime, I'll be back.
Awesome.
Take care.
Have a great rest
Yeah,
of the
the
day.
paperwork says,
I have to continue talking here, but you can go ahead and step back and get back to
Appropriating
what you need to do. But yes, thank you for, I know this was super, super last minute, but yeah,
look on page 47.
exit out this way. Yeah, so we are getting ready to start the finance meeting here at 1 o'clock, and we also have a county council meeting later tonight at 5. But yeah, gonna take some time to talk about maybe some events that we have coming up tomorrow at the Port Royal Government Center from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. There's going to be a free Narcan training event put on by our Alcohol and Drug Association here in Beaufort County. I'm going to try to get out there and do a report for BCTV, but it is open to the public and it is 100% free, and it only takes 5 minutes out of your time, and it would just be a great chance for anybody who is interested in learning and, you know, like I said, getting the free Narcan. So you never know when you're going to run into an emergency, and it is always useful and something that everybody should know how to do. And it's great that they are able to, you know, make these things more accessible. Another note, things over here on Beaufort County TV, where you're watching this right now, things have been expanding. So on Saturday evening, the Hilton Head Christian Academy versus John Paul II, the South Carolina Independent School Association state championship took place, and HHCA actually was able to win the SCISA state championship, and it was awesome. And it was all right here on Beaufort County TV. I want to give a shout out to our partnership with Beaufort's Own. He was able to go out there and live broadcast it. So yeah, there is all the time. We are constantly coming up with new ideas to better serve you guys at Beaufort County. It is a great. It just has been awesome. A lot of live sports coming up, and we're looking to expand and our reach constantly. And it's things like this that we really want to make sure the public is aware of, because, like I said, we do it all for you guys and for people that are interested in watching.
That's a separate item.
Interested in watching our channel. And I'm going to pull up a couple more events that we have had going on here at Beaufort County. So with our Beaufort County EMS in the summer of 2023, Peter Menard unfortunately suffered a traumatic injury, and it took months of recovery. But personnel from the Beaufort County EMS and Bluffton Township Fire District were able to meet with Mr. Menard, who wanted to stop by and say thank you for all the wonderful care that he received from Beaufort County. And they were able to get a picture. You can stop and see that on our Facebook page. We shared it, as well as
So we're looking at the MillionNet list.
emergency medical page.
Tom's recommending we just vote on each
Another
one, because there's some of us
event,
that don't want to give the money to certain
the
places.
MCAS Beaufort
should
Community
stay.
Officer Colonel Mark Bortman and Council Member Gerald Dawson, along with Jason Fowler, the representative for the Major General, and Todd McCaffrey, the Secretary of the SC Department of Veterans Affairs, and Jared Felix, our very own Assistant Administrator of Infrastructure, announced that they are going to be expanding the Spanish Moss Trail. So yeah, for all you people that love to get out there, there's going to be even more of Beaufort County to love. But that's all the time we have now. So thank you for tuning in here on the Council Countdown, and we will be starting our finance meeting here momentarily.
I'd like to call the Beaufort County Finance Administration and Economic Development Committee to order. And if we all can stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public notification of this meeting has been published, posted, and distributed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. And I do want to say that we do have a quorum. We have 3 of our 5 committee members that are here. And of course, anyone is allowed to attend that's even not on the committee and vote as a committee member. So let's move on then and ask for someone to approve our agenda for today. So thank you. That was
Mr.
Mr.
Dawson.
Dawson, and then seconded by Mr. Passman. All right. And then seeing no objection to that, if that has been approved, and there is no objection, let's move on then to approval of the minutes from January 22nd, which was a specially called meeting. I ask for someone to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. A second, please.
I'll second it.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Howard. And is there any objection to that? Seeing no objection, the minutes from January 22nd, 2024, special call council meeting or a finance meeting has been approved. And we now open up to our citizens comment period. Is there anyone that would like to get up and speak that's in the audience, or anyone else online that would like to speak today for citizens comments? All right. Seeing nobody, we're going to close citizens comments and then move on, and would like our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Denise Christmas, to come up and give our administrator report. Ms. Christmas, thank you for being here, and I like the sound of that, Chief Financial Officer. I know that's something that you've newly gotten, so again, thank you for being here.
Thank you a lot, appreciate it. So here we are, 62% through our fiscal year. And this report is through February 15th. So I'm going to give you the status on our financials, where we stand for the general fund, capital improvement fund, and our enterprise funds. Okay, here we go. So this is a summary. It's not very pretty, but it's a summary of the 6 funds that we'll be going through today. And you'll notice that only 2 of the 6 have a net loss. It's the Capital Improvement Fund and the Beaufort Executive Airport. So let's start with the general fund. So to date, our property tax revenue has come in at 95%. So that's a really good, solid revenue stream there, and we anticipate exceeding our budget before fiscal year end. So I highlighted that 95% up there at the top. So it's broken down. This is our revenue broken down by our major sources of revenue. And at the bottom, you'll see that we've collected $122.9 million of our budgeted $144.3. So we're at 85% of our collected, of our budget for collections in our revenue. At the bottom are 3 notations, which I've already discussed. The first one, we're at 95% for our tax collections. Our interest rates were expected to remain relatively flat during the budget process, but we have exceeded our budgeted collections by over 100%. So that means that we have a pretty strong economy right now, regardless of what, people may think. So fee revenue collections are also exceeding our budgeted revenue by about 10%, primarily from deed recording fees, transfers, and fees from our EMS, our ambulance rides, and our emergency medical services. These are our general fund expenditures. So at the top, I can't see what that percentage is, but Sarah, can you see it? There we go, 59%. So in the general fund, our salaries and benefits for all of our departments are is at 59% expended. So we are under budget in our salaries and benefits line item. And that's mainly because we budgeted what was exactly true and positions that were filled. So those vacancies are filled in our payroll contingency line item. So this number should reflect pretty accurate, pretty close to the amount that we've expended this year, which is 62%. So at the bottom, there's a total of 57%. That's what we've spent of our 62% lapse budget. I'm sorry, I've been under the weather for like 3 or 4 days, so my voice is scratchy. This is the capital improvement fund. Our revenue is at 6 million. We've spent 9.7 million. So this is where our loss is. And I'm not going to call it a loss right now. So these are expenditures and encumbrances. So we have encumbered on projects, on our large projects that may have large contracts. We've encumbered pretty hefty amounts. Thank you. So our revenue's coming in. Thank you, John. Our revenue is only through February 15th. So we have and will receive enough revenue, I'm sure, to cover our expenditures before fiscal year end. Our solid waste fund is looking nice. We have a net gain in it right now, and these are the breakdowns of our revenue collections, mainly property taxes. We do have recycling revenue up there at $157,668. And so we've spent less than what we've received, and we're on track there. Stormwater fund, our revenue is at the top, 6.3 million. And then our expenditures are 4.2 million. So we have a net gain right there as well. So that one looks pretty solid too. Beaufort Executive Airport, our revenues are broken down on the left, our expenses are on the right. Our revenues are less than what we have spent. We hope that this will catch up before fiscal year end. The primary reason for this is because what's been encumbered in the jet fuel avgas at the bottom right corner, $620,000. So that was the budget for that line item. And what they do at the airport is they do encumber the full amount because they know that they're going to purchase that much fuel. So that's why it's showing a loss right now. I'm sure it will catch up before fiscal year end, and they should either have a net gain or remain flat. And the last one is the Hilton Head Island Airport. It actually has a net gain right now of about $200,000. So their revenues are on the left and their expenses are on the right. And in all of these funds, their salaries and benefits in the enterprise funds, they are at or under budget. Is there any questions anybody has?
Any questions for Ms. Christmas?
Just one,
Yep, Ms. Howard.
maybe fuel costs down 17%, is that,
That's what it looks like.
yeah,
Yeah, so what we budgeted for this year was $3.50
oh,
per gallon. So, yeah,
and fuel has gone down.
yep, it's
Okay,
gone down. So that,
helps. to know.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. That's all for that presentation. If you want to see any other funds, financial statements, just let me know and I can present those next time. Those are the major funds. But if there are any others which you would like to see, just let me know.
So back to the capital improvements, so that was one that we were upside down currently. And we've set aside those funds, however, it's just they haven't come in yet. Is that what I
Well,
heard you say?
We've encumbered more on those large projects. And so what shows in our expenditures, they're actual and encumbrances totaled together. So I included encumbrances and actual expenditures. So that's why it looks higher. That number looks inflated in regards to our revenue collections. We will collect the revenue, though. I've seen from February 15th through the end of the month, I will share that information from the treasurer's office and we'll definitely cover our expenses this year. And revenue in general is coming in at a higher rate than what we expected, and that's of course due to the reassessment year. So every 5 years, it is a guessing game for county staff and counties across America, in the state of South Carolina especially. It's a moving target reassessment is, because this year I know we had fewer appeals than we had in the past. And that's good for revenue. So, there again, it holds true that the revenue collections will be higher for various reasons, not just that one. The appraised value of our properties definitely, have proven to have gone up. So, and we're seeing the end result of that.
All right, any other questions from Ms. Christmas regarding the Assistant County Administrator report? And seeing none, well, let's move on then to number 8 on our agenda. And it's again, Denise, you're up again, financial updates through January 31st, 2024.
Well, that was our financial update.
That was it, everything? Okay, it's all together. All right, let's make sure that
Done.
check off 7 and 8. Then let's move on then to number 9 on our agenda. And number 9. And this is recommendation of approval of an ordinance to amend Beaufort County Budget Ordinance for 2023-22 for the fiscal year 2023 to 24 to appropriate and transfer $250,000 from fund balance of the general fund.
Yes, sir.
So Ms. Christmas, you're up again. If you can just enlighten us on that, please.
Yes, sir, sure. So, back in January, was it January 11th? Do you remember? We brought forward, we had on our council agenda an item where council approved use of $250,000 for the Defusky Ferry operations from general funds fund balance. So this is the ordinance amending our budget ordinance. And in addition to the $250,000 for the ferry operations, in the midst of us converting our chart of accounts, Christine and I, we discovered that there were 3 funds that were classified as special revenue funds in our chart of accounts, which should have been classified under our general fund. So we took those 3 funds and rolled them into the general fund, converted them to general fund accounts, and those funds are spelled out in this ordinance to be transparent. They are funds 2230, 2252, and 2255. 2 of these funds were donation accounts that had been kept separate as special revenue funds for years, and that was wrong. They should have been under the general fund. And the other fund was also a special revenue fund for the sheriff. And after meeting and talking with their staff, they agreed that it should be in the general fund and kept separate with a project code. So those funds can be separated just for their use only. And we've done that for them, and they're actually purchasing some capital items from those funds that were left over. So the total amount of the amendment will be $652,918. That will increase the general fund's budget in revenue and in the expenditure line item, so it's balanced. And we've done that adjustment, and we are waiting to post upon your approval.
All right, so this would be a budget amendment that we would move on to county council for a reading at the March 11th council meeting. Is there any questions for Ms. Christmas on this matter? All right, do I have a motion?
If I might.
Yes, go ahead.
Denise.
Yes, sir.
After this $250,000 transfer, what would be the balance in the general fund balance? Do you
I
know?
don't know. I could pull it up. It still meets our requirement, our fund balance policy requirement of 30%.
Okay, we can get that later.
We're still good there, but I will let you know as soon as this is over.
Any other questions? All right, if I can then have a motion to move this to council.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dawson. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ms. Tabernick. And is there any objection to us moving this forward? Seeing no objection, this will then move to council for first reading.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Christmas. All right, let's move on then to number 10 on our agenda, presentation of Economic Development Corporation's fiscal year 25 product development plan. This would be Mr. O'Toole and fiscal impact. Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation asking the council to consider creating a revolving fund of $19,070,000 to seize short, medium, and long-term development opportunities. The funds would reside with the county and be requested for specific acquisitions and infrastructure built out as the opportunity arises. And Mr. O'Toole, thank you for coming here today. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Passament, and council members. It's a pleasure to be with you today. Sarah, thanks for getting my presentation up on short notice. My bad, but thank you. Last year, at your strategic planning session, council members asked, well, when are we going to see the big asks? So it's here today. And I'll just go over our thoughts on product development. We're looking for a $19 million, 70,000. And we have a plan, includes short-term investments, medium-term, and long-term investments. As we can see at the Beaufort Commerce Park, and I'll be with the city council tomorrow on that, they bought that land for $11,000 an acre, and today we sell it for $40,000 an acre. So we could expect to some extent, maybe not your engineering and legal costs, to be replenished, but the sale of the land, the improvements that we would make on land, and we've have identified sites throughout the county that could be assembled. Now, as we look at the overview of our product plan, you know, we've consistently spoke about Beaufort County, good public policy, having 6 strong spokes. And obviously, last year, the residents spoke very loudly on environment, or 2 years ago. Last year, the residents spoke about education very strongly. But you can't just have a good wheel with only 2 strong spokes. And I think there's reason to be concerned about economic drivers for future generations. I spoke to this group before, a quote my son introduced me to, that it was wise men plant trees whose shade they'll never sit under. And that's why you want to look at what I'm suggesting today for the benefit of future generations. Workforce, housing, and workforce training, and then transportation being the other important spokes. As we look at product development, a lot of times people say, oh, that's a wonderful site. Sometimes you'll hear about it in the national sense. People talk about transportation-oriented development, perhaps a little biased, having worked 18 years in the electric and gas industry. I think that if you look at the cost of land and then the cost of developing product, you really want to be where the infrastructure, that nexus of electric, gas, communications, transportation, and where it fits well with zoning. And as you know, in the last 2 years, when we are working at odds with what the residents expect or with the comprehensive plan, it's a lot of wasted time. So we want to make sure that what we're thinking about is in step with what the community wants. And to date, this is a little bit of bragging, and I should introduce my new colleague. That's Kelly Brunson back there. We're not going to miss a beat with Kelly. She's sharp as a tack. So we're really lucky there. But to date, we've done 65 projects and haven't been out of step with the Not in My Backyard group or an environmental group yet. We have a project that'll be coming forward. Hank Edmondson and I have been working on it. It's an airport project out at Hilton Head. We met with the residents and that are affected by it at Palmetto Hall and Port Royal Plantation. And by working slowly and in sync with the community, we can do things that fit in well and don't really upset that spoke I always put at 12 o'clock, which is the environment. And so as you look at land in Beaufort County and the region, obviously, with our own Green Penny and state land banks efforts, the Open Land Trust, Coastal Conservation, all the groups that care about the environment, there's less land. It's going to be a scarce commodity. So you've got to make some, as I hope you will agree, that as a community, we have to make some efforts to preserve spaces where people can make a living. And add to that, if you look at, and I just pulled this off the internet last night, but if you look at the dollars that a home builder can make, if you look at in 2019, we were at the median house price in this county, according to Redfin, was $375, and now it's just under $600K. Home builders, people whose business it is to make a profit building houses, are going to continue. So you've got that crunch coming in from the environmental groups, you have the developers, and so I think it is a critical time, having given the thought that we've given to this over 6 years, to move forward in a thoughtful way. And so the way that we see it, and I don't want to spell out all the decisions that would be made, short-term acquisitions, many of them have been spoken about, though. Up in Yemassee, there's an opportunity to do a true multi-county industrial park. At Lebico, we've been telling the people in that area that there's going to be a response by Beaufort County, so it's time to do something there, and there'll be other opportunities throughout the county. Part of that is building out infrastructure, but I think that if you entertain a plan like this, and your question is, how do you pay for it? And that's for you to decide and staff to decide. But it would make sense to have a pool of funds so that you could preserve land that today you think makes sense. And then as we go through the process, I'm a big believer in total community involvement, transparency, letting the community see what we're doing, and having that buy-in. And then if we move on any properties, they would all come back to this council. The funds would actually reside with the county, and I think we could do some great things. We kind of have a process of how we think that would unfold with the some of the sites are mentioned there and how we could go about it. Some of them are complicated. Lebico being a good example, it's a brownfield. I think there are a lot of reasons to do something there. And again, we've worked really closely with the environmental groups, in particular Coastal Conservation and the Open Land Trust. But that's an area for environmental justice. Something should be done there sooner than later. And we've been working with DHEC and environmental attorneys and county staff to go through the voluntary cleanup contracts, so we leave responsible parties in place to clean up those properties. But there, not only would we be using your resources, but we would also continue to work with our partners throughout the state and the nation to leverage other funds, and that would be our friends at the Southern Carolina Alliance, Department of Commerce, and the utility tax credits. Dominion, Palmetto Electric, Hargray have all been great partners. So I do think we have a plan at this point. This isn't my phrase, but they say to those who much is given, much is expected. And a lot of people said, well, why didn't you do this 5 years ago? I think it's critically important. One, you have a demonstrated process and results, and then you understand the market. And so that's why I think at this juncture, it's kind of critical. And I'll give you an example. Up in the north side of the county, we've been working across Jasper, Hampton, Beaufort County to preserve, and I'll give you the net number, but preserve better than 2,900 acres, of which 500 would be carved out for this multi-county industrial park. The difference of where we are today versus 2014, one of my mentors used to say, power is what you exert, less resistance. I think we have less resistance because we're in step with the critical partners. And so that's my thought. What do you guys watch? Are you watching my, I'm wondering if I had an angel on my shoulder or what. Okay, that's where you're singing. Okay, very good. I've only been here for a short while, right, Sarah? Okay, well, any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yep, sound good.
I understand, I get all the other acronyms, but Catawba COG, what is that?
That's a
It's a
cog up in the upstate that
Right.
actually administers and works with our own council of government
Okay.
to administer brownfield cleanup funds.
Okay, that was my confusion, because I knew they weren't here
Yeah,
physically.
yeah, so they work with the Low Country Council of Governments,
Okay,
but
on the Lobito
they have
side, or-
they have an environmental cleanup fund, which you borrow from, and then when you do it, it's forgiven.
Okay, gotcha.
All the brownfield projects come
Through
through
them?
Catawba COG and then LCOG associated with them.
And we've gotten a grant from them for Lobico?
No, we haven't, no, we would expect to
would?
apply.
All right.
They've been like after us to apply, so.
Okay.
I have some, oh,
Who would do that application?
We'd work with Hank Admonson on that. Yeah. I will say, and, you know, I'm not deferring or putting more work on Hank, but we're working very closely, so Hank can lean on us and we can lean on Hank. It's a nice time.
I have some questions.
Ms. Brown, go ahead.
Mr. O'Toole, you have on your website, office pad site for sale, 4810 Bluffton Parkway, Bluffton. Was that one of your projects?
Which one is that?
Office pad site? for
No,
sale.
that would be Dr. Patel. He's got a medical center there right across from the county building.
Oh, okay, so I'm thinking the wrong place. Did you develop the place behind the Bluffton County building?
We did not, but we worked with county council to have Tim Dolnick develop that.
Oh, okay, so that wasn't Beaufort County Economic Development.
You could say it is because the county had some, and we probably have to go back and revisit that, but we had $577,000 of utility tax credits that were sitting with the county on that site. The parcel was bought through utility tax credits and county funds. And so we were under pressure from the utilities to either develop it or return to them the utility tax credits. It was a process. It was a long process. But I think in retrospect, the outcome, the building is gorgeous. The development is, but we're a big believer where the private sector can do things. We like to see the private sector do
Yeah, I'm
it.
big on private sector too.
Yeah.
But I went by there yesterday, and it's just a bunch of offices that people are leasing or buying or whatever. I don't know how that's economic development.
Can you
explain that?
they were responsible to create 85 jobs. They've met that. So there's better than 85 jobs here. There might be 160 jobs there. And the investment there was $10 million. So we think, and by all definitions of economic development, the job creation and the investment are economic development.
Okay, so every company that leases space in those buildings, there's two of them, right? They are required or were required to create 85 jobs each?
We held the developer to that. We had a letter of credit.
Oh, really?
And he had to
And did they do
demonstrate.
that?
Yes.
Because there's a painting company and a building company, so they have, oh, okay, interesting. I had some other questions here. So this money, will some of it to buy land with also?
Yes.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, because the county, it would be cheaper to my opinion, it would be cheaper for the taxpayer if we were to explore the land the county already owns. So why build or buy more land?
A lot of the land we've asked the planning department to look at that for either economic development or workforce housing. Where it was seen as surplus, I believe over the 6 years I've been here, the county has sold properties, but not to the scale. I mean, one tract we're looking at is 500 acres. Another tract would deliver 70 acres for diversified economic development. If you leave Beaufort County to itself, right, and let the private sector do what it wants to
That was my
do.
next question.
Yeah, so if you do that,
Yeah.
you would probably end up with a lot of, I won't pick on any name brands, but you'd probably end up with a lot of anywhere retail that you see, you know, on Long Island or on the stretch leading into Dallas. We do think we have a special area, but it's always been the thought in Beaufort County and the folks who brought me in to set up this organization that you have a blue chip industry, defense, $2.5 billion, right? 2.6. You have hospitality and tourism, but you really only have two legs on the stool. So if you were to have a portfolio, you wouldn't want to just have two stocks. You'd want to have a diversified portfolio. So the reason that the four mayors at the time and the county got together to form the Economic Development Corporation was to diversify the economy. And then back to the Myrtle Park development you're talking about, near the county building in Bluffton. There are these service jobs that are critically important to all of our industry, that are important, and they should have a place to operate from other than in Colleton or the further reaches of Jasper County. It's a quality of life issue for our workers to be able to leave their house and go to work in the town they live in.
Right,
And that
exactly.
probably would lead to less traffic on your roads, people headed to Savannah or to Charleston or wherever.
So why not have the companies that move here find and buy their own land and build their own businesses? But you're saying that's probably not a good idea. It's probably better for Beaufort County Economic Development Corp. to buy the land and then sell it to them. Is that the way I understand it?
Yes.
Okay.
Because oftentimes when companies make decision, they want the site to be ready. They're not going to wait for, and if you just take some projects that have bubbled through Beaufort County in the last 3 years, if you spend a lot of money with lawyers and engineers and then get a no, you've wasted a lot of money. And the more that happens in Beaufort County, the worse off our brand is. And then when you think of the delicate nature of land in Beaufort County, we should be very intentional where we want to see industry be so that it doesn't disturb what we love about the delicate nature of the environment here in Beaufort County. So I believe it makes sense. The council may decide otherwise, that we should be intentional about where we expect to see development. And that's why you get in the driver's seat and do economic development this way.
Okay, so I used to work for Evicor Healthcare, which was CareCore National when I went there in 2014. Prior to that, Don Ryan, who brought the company in from New York and Colorado, he was on a fast track to build that company. And he was required at the time, this is 10 years ago, obviously, he had to have so many jobs making $50,000 or more a year. And it really worked out well, and it still does, because now Cigna came down here and purchased it, and you know Cigna well because you're from Connecticut. So, but I understand from other people, someone that I used to work with at Evicor built some buildings, and it took him 3 years. So the zoning process it's a huge hurdle, and it needs to be, there's need to be incentives, and the rules need to be changed regarding the zoning, because it shouldn't take 3 years. When Don Ryan came down here like that, created a company with great paying jobs. And that's what I've been trying to do as well, myself. But the zoning, I think the rules need to change.
Well, I will tell you, last week, and Kelly, you'll have to correct my numbers, but we had a defense contractor looking at a site, aerospace and defense contractor, looking at a site in Beaufort. We sat down with Rob Merchant and Hillary from his staff, and we had a very smooth meeting where they were very helpful. The problem is that, you know, what we find sometimes is people will submit an application, they'll say, oh, the planning staff is slow, but then when we dig into it, we find that they haven't actually completed their application. So there's always two sides to every story.
Right.
But I would say that the gentleman, Tim, who we brought in to meet with the planning staff, all you can do is simple, swift, and certain, and I think the staff lived up to that in the meeting. I mean, He wanted to build 45, and they said, well, you probably can get to 25 pretty quickly. So before he bought that property, he knows what he's up against. So there is a healthy process. It's just when people try to stretch the zoning rules that it sometimes gets slowed down and complicated.
Okay.
And that's again why with industry, we really want to get ahead of it. Today we went through 7 proposals from engineering firms because we want to have them teed up to start projects as they arise.
Do you agree that gas stations and car washes are not economic development?
In some parts, they are considered economic development.
Yeah, but they
You know,
really
if you're in a rural community, it could be. For us,
could be.
Self-storage, gas stations, I'm amazed at how many gas stations there are in Beaufort County. So it's not something we focus on.
Yeah, okay, all right. So this money will be used for buying land, and what else?
Building out the, designing,
Building.
master planning the land and building out
Oh,
infrastructure.
master planning it too?
Yes.
Oh, master planning, building it, okay, building the building. Like,
Not building the building.
No?
For instance, up in Yemassee,
Yeah.
we'll look at where the utilities are, gas, water, sewer, electric. There could be some build out there. It could be entry roads, curb cuts and things like that that we would engage in. And no, we would not build a building. We don't see building a building with this. There have been cases where we'll put the pad in as an incentive to get somebody
pad,
there.
you say pad like a foundation? Is that what you're saying?
Like bringing in the right quality dirt, improving the
Like they
compaction.
did on 17 going to Savannah? They brought
What's
in a
that?
lot of dirt.
Yeah,
17
no, I
goes to
don't know
Savannah.
about that, but I will tell you that we did through South Carolina Department of Commerce, we got a pad built in the Commerce Park. It came to $333,000 to get a pad ready. And we're having meetings with a company that plans to invest $35 million on that pad in the next 9 months. So they want to be operational January of '25. So that's where economic development makes sense. You put that infrastructure in, and now the company can see them getting it open on time.
Okay, and I have one more question. You just mentioned 29 acres up in Yemassee somewhere.
2,900.
2,900?
Mhm.
What did I say? I'm sorry.
I think you said 29.
Oh, 2,900 acres?
Yes.
right? Okay. So you said 500 acres is for industrial park. What happens to the other 2,400?
It'll be a continuation of the habitat you see there.
Conservative, it'd be land would be
Yes, yeah.
conserved?
Yes.
Okay.
Which I believe, this project, really could be a national best practice of environmental, economic development, and even workforce housing, housing close to where the workers will be. So I think and it's a very neighborly project in that we expect to participate equally with Jasper and Hampton County.
Mr. Glover.
Oh, okay. Eventually. Go ahead. Eventually.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. First of all, I appreciate the question coming from Ms. Brown. It basically explained everything that you've been doing and where you are right now. And I do want to say that I do support you and where you are right now in economic development in Beaufort County. The question I have is really a financial question and terminology. For you, short-term, medium-term, long-term means what in years? You have 90.
I want to be consistent, so I want to be consistent. So, short term could be accomplished in 24 months.
Okay.
A medium term would be 48 months or 4 years.
Okay.
And a long term would be 6 years.
Thank you.
just so you know, a lot of people know about Raleigh and the Research Triangle, right? That was an overnight success in 50 years, you know. It was out there percolating and, you know, the late 90s, it was it. But it was out there since the 60s, you know, just.
I want to say that, and I'm hoping we can accomplish that, the Yamasee tract that you talked about, 2,900 acres of land, working with the environmental preserving most of that acreage and stuff. I think that's really the approach that a lot of people want to see. And you talk about an industrial park being there, but I've witnessed and I've seen a site in Florida on the West Coast where they actually conserve almost 80% of that land. And then the development that came from that is just an amazing sight to, I wouldn't want to live there, but I'll visit there and stuff on vacation.
Yeah, well, I think this could be nice, and I think when we start with 500, I believe once we do the conceptual plan, I think even more of that, I think I can pronounce the name right, down near the Pocatalico and things like that, I could see us staying even further away from it than projected today. And the design of it will stay very far away from having impacts on the Ace Basin.
Yeah, Mr. Dawson, go ahead.
Yeah, if I might, John is before us asking us to approve $19 million for the Economic Development Growth Plan for Beaufort County. We all know that Beaufort County is growing by leap and bounds, and we have to balance the growth between economic development and tourism and ad valorem taxes as far as supporting the services that we provide for the county. And so the environment and the conservation element plays into economic development, where I think John, to Councilman Glover's point, John is at the point where he has developed a good working relationship between the Open Land Trust and the, Rural and Critical Land, where they are working jointly to actually look at sites and then develop a plan to actually conserve and preserve, but also set aside some acres for economic development. And I think we're on the right track. I think John and his staff is doing a good job as far as what they have accomplished in the past, and I think we owe them the support to continue with the process of trying to develop good paying jobs here in Beaufort County, not only for the residents, local residents, but for those residents who want to move to Beaufort County and make this a place of residence for the future as well. So I support your request.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Joe?
No, I'll go last.
Just one more question.
Okay, Mr. O'Toole, what's your plan B if council does not approve this revolving account?
We'll continue to chip away at economic development. We will. I know when I'm trying to be funny. I wasn't trying to be funny then. No, we'll keep chipping away at it. You know, we have more sites in the Beaufort Commerce Park, but looking at the success we're having, that will get exhausted. We're doing interesting projects with private developers throughout the county, so we'll continue to work on private property. But in terms of our experience with the last spec building, if we have product, we can get great jobs in Beaufort County. We just need more product.
Thank you.
So, yeah, there's a way at it, you know, but it's a little more incremental than I think, you know, we could do if we had this.
Are you thinking about taking this money and buying Willow Run by any chance? Because you've talked about that in the past.
We talked to county staff and Bluffton staff, and it appears that there might be Bluffton and the county working on it, but it doesn't look like it would be an economic development site today. But if we had this fund and when the two staffs work it out and some portion of it could be available, we'd look at it, but it might be more like a carve out like Myrtle Park or the development that's now going to happen at off of Buckwalter, right near the police station in Bluffton. So, but the more I hear about this and this road that needs to be built that might cost, $6 million or $7 million, and what is it, 5B and all of these other things, that's probably outside of the year range that Councilman Glover asked me to define. So, but we would want to stay fleet with these funds and see what opportunities present them. And as the opportunities present themselves, we would bring them to the council for approval.
All right, Ms. Howard, and then Mr.
I had,
Passman.
and I think you've answered this question. When I first initially read this, it's like, oh my gosh, $19 million at one, but this may be a question for Ms. Christmas. This would be as it comes in as a request. We wouldn't or would we set aside $19 million out of this year's budget coming up?
Is that what the ask is?
Yeah.
I mean, where are we gonna find?
I don't know where the money comes from. I don't know. I don't
That's my
know.
question.
Out of the sky.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's what he said.
I don't know if the option to add it to a penny, within a penny tax, or I don't know the vehicles available to you, but I've been in council meetings, I believe, where council for rural and critical lands set aside a source of funds, and then as they
That
have
was a
projects, they
referendum.
bring them to you.
Yeah, that was
That
a
was a
referendum, so
Yeah.
that's not what I read here. This is not a referendum.
No.
I don't know the vehicle. I'm
Well,
I'm
before I
deferring
can
to you.
vote for it, I got to know the vehicle.
Yeah, where's it
so,
gonna come from?
I can hear Mr. Hervishon, who obviously politic his spot, where he always said, so
Oh.
what's the funding source?
Yeah,
And
that's the
what
funding
always
source. Is that
what he
goes
said?
for. Yeah.
That's my question to you.
Well, right back at you, I guess.
Most of you have stolen my thunder.
Sorry, Joe, I
We now
didn't
have a
mean to do that.
definition of the timelines.
Right.
The $19 million is an overall request. It does not have to be $19 million set aside right now.
Right.
Because as you said in your presentation, it is a revolving account whereby money can go back into that. I think what we need to do is to focus on your first 2-year short-term plan of over $9 million. One of the things that I would hope that you could bring to county council was what we did at Converge. You did a wonderful job of explaining the target organizations, I'll use that broad-based term, that you would expect to bring to Beaufort County because we don't have the land like surrounding counties. So we're not going to build the car industry. We're going to go at other industries because we have smaller pieces of property. So I think that's essential for you to bring that to council. And then we have to have the discussion of how much are we willing to put forward for a 2-year plan to be expanded as we go along. That's going to be, in my view, what we have to decide. It's not going to be $19 million. We don't have $19 million, although it's a wonderful plan you've put together.
Right, and that's something.
And you
that-
don't have to do the whole plan. I mean, to the chairman's point, we can, as the opportunities present themselves, pick the ones that you think make sense.
If you don't ask, you don't receive, so we understand that. So obviously you come in high and look for something else. So as we just found out from Ms. Crispus' presentation earlier, that, our general fund budget is about $143 million a year. So you start talking about 19 million, that is a huge, huge chunk. We don't have that money to move forward with. So as Mr. Passman said, that we'd look at, obviously we want you to succeed, we want things to work out well. And we do want to fund you, but again, it's got to be a realistic amount that we're looking at. So obviously we just can't forward this to county council and ask for the 19.5 million. Any recommendations from staff on what our next step would be to try to figure out what?
Well, I think we have to work with the Economic Development Corporation. John is putting together his budget that he needs to operate for the coming fiscal year, part of which could be funded by us through the first 2 years, or some of it.
And John, is there any other monies out there, the matching funds or things like that, whenever we put out there? So again, if you get us money from us, what other organizations or revenue sources do you have access to besides just, saying we need 19.5 million from the county itself for a 5-year project?
Probably the State Department of Commerce would be the larger bucket that we could go to. And then SCA, which has our proviso money each year, we can work with them to fund some portion of the purchase as well. To the chairman's point, you have the Site and Jobs Fund. So if any portion of that we're not asking for an increase in operations budget in the next fiscal year. We were not looking at an increase in the site funds budget, but because I didn't know how you were going to fund this, but whatever you fund could go into that, and then we could bring the purchases. When we buy land, it's owned by Beaufort County. We don't own, the corporation doesn't own property, so I would think you could fund it through the Site and Job Fund, some portion of the plan, and we could probably look at contacting the Department of Commerce to see what portion of our short-term plan they can fund.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, good.
Mr. O'Toole, out of the 93, which is 2 years, would the Yamasee project be a part of that? Or is that Yamasee project in the long term? And do you have a part?
It's probably in the near term. If we're going to seize that opportunity, we're probably going to have to do it in the next 12 to 18 months, or it'll pass.
What the chairman said, if you would give us a near-term proposal to be funded over the next year or two, and include the sites or the projects that you think should be in there, that give us something to chew on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are things happening that we need to discuss with our partnerships. What SCA is doing in that area with John.
Right.
The Lubico site. The Lubico site has been hanging around for I don't know how many years. We learned that the Brownfield grant, they're looking for us to do that as soon as possible. That's something we should have been doing a while ago. So we need to move on certain things because timing is everything in life. Things are changing. And I will tell you the biggest change that's going to come is I-95. As it begins to be widened, all of that land along I-95 is ripe for development.
All right, so is there any action from this committee today?
Mr. Chairman, I would ask if you would, I don't know, to direct the staff to work with Mr. O'Toole to come back with some kind of proposal and a funding source for us to just kind of nibble on to move it forward and stuff. I'm like Mr. Chairman, Passerman, I'm ready to see something happening in economic development. And I think the sites in the area that he's targeting is where we want to plant commercial development. Because we got a number of, almost 25% of our tax base got to come from commercial property. So I'm ready to move forward.
All right, so we have Mr. Glover wants us to move forward, but that's not an action to move it to county council. So right now we're giving direction to staff to move forward. Yes, Ms. Christmas.
Mr. O'Toole, is the Economic Development
Corporation, is it a 501c3?
Yes, it is.
It is. Has the 501c3 ever purchased property in its name?
We have not. I believe our bylaws prohibit us from
Okay.
incurring debt.
Okay. I'd like to talk to you about that.
Okay, great.
Later, if we could.
Appreciate it.
Because I have some ideas.
That'd be great.
Okay.
So we'll work with staff if everyone's amenable to that and come back with a plan.
That sounds like the direction that is unanimous for our committee. So, all right, Mr. O'Toole, thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
as always. We appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, and let's move on then. And next up is number 11, and that is discussion of additional supplemental pay for Beaufort County poll workers.
No, number 10.
No, it's 11.
We didn't do 10.
Yes,
That we just
That
finished
was-
in.
That was.
Execute documents to convey a portion of property owned by Beaufort County.
US
No,
701.
What one are you looking at? Yep. Public facility.
Okay, keep going. I'll go back.
It's okay.
We'll ignore you, Tab, it's all right.
Yeah, that's okay.
All right,
Oh,
number
I see it
11.
right here. Yeah.
Number 11 is ready to go.
Discussion, we're ready to go.
Thank you.
Discussion of additional supplemental pay for Beaufort County poll workers.
It's here.
And Mr. Don Lucas, Board of Voter Registration Elections of Beaufort County.
I have to
Thank
recuse myself and I'll be in the other room. My husband is a poll worker, so.
Okay.
I cannot be part of this
Aim this at
discussion.
you.
Very good.
Oh, really?
Push what
Yeah.
button?
Okay.
Did you fight for poll workers? She's got it for me, yeah.
Oh, I need one too. to
Anybody
sign.
else?
Oh, is your wife a
Okay.
poll worker?
She's doing her civic duty.
Oh, okay.
How's that?
Okay,
We're going on committee after a while.
see you later.
You're gonna miss a great discussion.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it right now.
Shall we wait?
I didn't think I was.
All right, so Mr. Glover, Ms. Howard, and Mr. Passman too recused themselves?
No, I think we just.
Joe just, okay.
No, I don't think he refuses.
I'm gonna look, Mr. Lucas, thank you for coming. Go ahead.
Thank you for
Appreciate
having
being
me.
here.
I'd like to introduce the rest of my team. I am Donald Lucas, and I am a member of the Board of Voter Registration and Elections Board. With me, I have Aileen Mitchell, who is our chair. I have Beverly Dorr, Elizabeth Johnson, if each of you would raise your hand as I have Elizabeth Johnson, Jim Backer, and Matt Sweeney. And we have the director of our elections office with us, Marie Smalls, also. Raise your hand, smile. Okay, thank you for having us today. Let's talk about requests for supplemental pay for poll workers today. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about what's a poll worker. What is it that they do? Why is this so important to the election process? We're going to talk about the need for the poll workers. We have a number of critical factors that are driving an increased need for our poll workers. We're going to talk a little bit about their current compensation scheme. We're going to talk about some compensation surveys that we did to see how we compared to a number of surrounding counties within the state of South Carolina. We're also going to talk about a number of recruiting and retention challenges that we're facing that are making it more and more challenging to recruit and retain our poll workers. And then we're going to get to the crux of the matter and make a request of y'all. Now, first off, how many of y'all remember the 2016 and the 2020 elections? I'm not going to ask you if you voted. I'm going to presume you all do. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. But how many of y'all remember the last time you voted and you went into the polling location? You were probably met at the door, someone who greeted you and asked you if you had a government-issued photo ID, had this hand. I see you shaking your hand. You were there. Please have that ready. Then they took you to the registration desk where they verified your ID and your address. Then they probably printed a paper ballot, handed it to you, someone escorted you to the ballot marking device. You fed the ballot in there, you made your selections, and somebody took you to a big box called a scanner where you fed that ballot into it and recorded your vote. And then you got to the part that everybody looks forward to. They gave you the I voted sticker, and you stuck that proudly on your shoulder and walked out the door. These are the people that we're talking about today. Those are our poll workers. We'll talk about why they do it, what they do it, or why they do it, and why it's so important. Now, our poll workers come from all walks of life. They're students, they're working people, and they're retirees. In fact, the vast majority of our poll workers today are retirees. These are all civic-minded people with a sense of community, and they're giving back to the community is important to them. They're all registered voters, and most of them work in precincts in or near where they work or where they live. Our poll workers typically work 1 or 2 days per year, and they do their jobs exceptionally well. Now, of course, there are always exceptions. For example, on December 12th in Beaufort, we had a special election where they elected a mayor. Also, February 15th, we had a special election in Bluffton where they filled a vacant town council seat. So, of course, there are always exceptions to this. Now, in looking at the calendar for this year, we have 5 elections on the schedule that we know of for this year, not counting any potential runoffs. So let's hope we don't have to cover those. Now, we have two primary classifications that we're talking about in your polling location. Poll clerks and the poll managers. The poll clerks are the ones that are running the show at any given polling location. In some locations, we have multiple precincts voting under one roof. And in this case, we'll have a lead clerk which runs the show. Now, the lead poll clerk they're responsible for all the other poll managers. They arrange the polling location to ensure an efficient and effective flow. They ensure compliance. They complete and verify all the required paperwork and reports. And they also act as a liaison to the county elections office, primarily to Marie Smalls and her staff during the election day in case there are any questions or any issues that might come up. They also pick up the equipment and supplies required to execute the elections on election day. Now, when I say equipment and supplies, I'm talking everything from the electronic poll books that they use to register you and verify your name and address, to pens and pencils, to provisional ballots, as well as to the emergency ballots. So as you can tell, this is not a position to be taken lightly. They're also responsible for setting up the equipment properly in the morning and closing it down in an appropriate manner at the end of the day. And then after that, delivering a number of election-related materials to Marie Smalls and her staff. Poll manager is the other classification. These are the worker bees that I mentioned a moment ago. They're the ones that greet you at the door, and they're the ones that give you the I voted sticker at the end of the process. They monitor the lines, they process the voters, any resolutions that need, any issues that need a resolution that need to be addressed during the election day, they handle. They oversee the ballot marking devices and the scanners, as I mentioned. And they also provide a curbside voting process. A number of people don't realize this, but we have a number of voters that aren't physically able in going into the polling location. And so we have a process where we can bring a voting machine out to the car and they can cast their vote sitting in their car, so everyone gets to vote. They also monitor the exits and they also provide poll closing support. Now, let's talk about the need for poll managers. 2024, the general election, we anticipate having the highest turnout in Beaufort County history. We anticipate 140,000 plus registered voters will turn out at a rate of about 75%. We anticipate 60% of this turnout will be on election day. Now that 60% is going to be something north of 84,000 voters. So that's going to require quite a few poll managers to effectively and efficiently execute the voting process. In 2023, the legislature approved Act 82, which increased the number of precincts in Beaufort County by 33%. We went from 95 to 126 precincts for this year. It's the largest known single-year increase in South Carolina history. We're also noticing unprecedented scrutiny from the State Election Commission and the public. Now, given the issues that we see on the news every day across the nation, this should not come as any surprise. We also have a very high political profile across the nation right now also. As you're aware, we had the first in the nation Democratic presidential preference primary earlier this month. We had the first in the South Republican presidential primary just this previous Saturday. So both of these are adding to the scrutiny that we're receiving for the elections process. We anticipate the need for about 800 poll workers for the upcoming elections due to a variety of reasons which I just mentioned. Now, one of the challenges that we're facing in obtaining and recruiting these 800 poll workers is we're noticing that a lot of our current poll workers are aging out. We have a number of poll workers that have been doing this for years. Now they're approaching their 70s and in some cases early 80s. So getting up and reporting to the polls at 6 a.m., working a 13 to 14 hour day, and then closing down the polls and going home, it's not as easy as it used to be. And so a number of them are opting out, not going to do this anymore. Now, given this landscape, we know from past experience right up to the present that poll worker pay is a key component of recruitment and retention that's needed for an efficient election and a favorable voter experience. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail on this in a moment. Now, In November of last year, we, Beaufort County Board of Voter Registration Election, did our own survey. We talked to the 20 largest counties in South Carolina. We were one of them. Talked to the directors of each election office, and we talked to them about if they were paying a poll supplement or not. In those conversations, the issue of poll worker pay was the number one concern on all of their minds. Now, in January of this year, the Legislative Audit Council, on behalf of the General Assembly, released this report. Now, surprisingly, if you haven't read this, it's actually very interesting reading, so I would recommend it to you. They released this report, and that statement that you see there. In our survey of county election directors, insufficient pay was reported as the most common reason why it is difficult to recruit poll workers. That's actually on page 107 of this report. So that report and our survey last November both correlated on the same issue, that pay issue is a concern for everyone. Not surprisingly, that other statement right there, Beaufort County feedback from poll workers and potential poll workers correlates with the survey. In our conversations with our poll workers, and when we're talking to potential poll workers, same thing. We hear the same concerns. The current rate of pay is not really an incentive for someone to come out at 6 a.m. and work a 13 to 14-hour day. Now, let's talk about the details of some poll worker compensations. Now, the state reimburses us now for the expenses of the poll workers working election day. Our poll clerks receive $60 for attending a 2 to 3 hour mandatory training session prior to the election, and they receive another $135 for working the election itself. So that's the poll clerk's going to receive $195. Now remember, the poll clerks are the ones running the show. They're the manager of that precinct. Poll managers receive $60 also for completing a mandatory 2 to 3 hour training session prior to the election, and $75 for the day. So their total is $135 for working the election process. Now, this next statement is interesting. In South Carolina, counties may offer poll workers supplemental pay using county funds. The idea of supplementing poll workers' pay is not anything new. There, on page 107 of this report also is where that statement came from. That report then goes on to briefly outline 11 other counties that the State Election Commission is aware of that pays a poll worker supplement, and those supplements range from $25 to $125, depending on the county. Now, as I mentioned, we did some compensation surveys on our own. Now, our survey was ranking counties top 20 by number of registered voters. This was only one aspect of the research that we did. In addition to talking to the 19 directors of the other election offices, we're also in contact with other board members from other counties, and we also had conversations with the State Election Commission staff. A number of our board members have been back and forth to Columbia several times over the fourth quarter of last year for training sessions and election-related meetings. And wherever we were there, we'd canvass the rest of the room if there were any other board members. If so, we'd ask them, are you paying a supplement? If so, how much is it? Do you think it's effective? Is it working? We also had conversations with the State Election Commission staff. What are they seeing? Who are they aware of that's paying a supplement? How effective is that? We also did a website search of the 46 counties in the state of South Carolina to see overall who was paying what and how much. I mentioned the Legislative Audit Council report that we have also as another data source. Now, this last bullet was something that came out of our conversations and talking with the directors for the 19 other election offices that we surveyed. We discovered that 2 counties currently allow county employees to work election day without being charged a vacation day or any paid time off. Now, when you think about it, this is a brilliant idea, because county staff is a ready-made source of potential poll workers. They go to the office on Monday, they work the polls on Tuesday, they go back to the office on Wednesday. So it's a ready-made source of poll workers at no additional cost to the county. We'll talk about that briefly a little later on. Now, if we look across all 46 counties in the state of South Carolina, half of them are paying a poll supplement. And these supplements range from $20 to $125. You can see Beaufort County just to the right of center there. Currently, we are not paying a supplement. In our survey of the other 19 largest counties, I can tell you that the directors were all in agreement when we had these conversations that regardless of the amount of this, if they were paying a supplement, regardless of the amount of the supplement, it still wasn't enough. Every one of them was facing a strong challenge in recruiting and retaining their current poll worker workforce. Now, in this report that the Legislative Audit Council released in January, on page 105, it talks about 8 counties that were not successful in recruiting enough poll workers for an election last year. One of the consequences of this was that they had to close several polling locations and consolidate these with other polling locations. Now, the downside to this was it added much more wait time to the length of the lines at the various precincts, as well as it caused a little bit of, it diminished the faith in the democratic system among those that they talked to that had to travel. Now, you can imagine the impact that this could have on voter turnout. People don't mind going into their community to vote, but if you ask them to get in the car and drive 2, 3, 4, 5 miles down the road, some of them get a little aggravated, and in some cases, they may not go and vote. So this is something that we want to avoid, as well as the increase in any potential wait time. Now, 14 of the top 20 counties in South Carolina pay a poll supplement if you rank them by number of registered voters, and this is what we show here. You can see Beaufort County right there in the middle, highlighted in the yellow. Again, the poll supplements range from $20 to $125. As I mentioned, Beaufort County is highlighted. Now, the statewide average of registered voters per county is about 70,000 voters. As you can see, 14 of these counties on this graph, 14 of them have 70,000 or more registered voters. Of that 4, all but 4 of them are paying a supplement. And Beaufort County is one of that 4 that is not paying a supplement currently. This is a bit of a different look. If you rank the top 20 counties in South Carolina by per capita income, you can see Beaufort County comes in at number 2, right there highlighted in yellow. Now, the average of the 11 counties that are known to pay supplements for this is about $59. Now, the statewide average per income per capita is $53,618. And looking at this graph, 9 counties meet or exceed that average. Of those 9 counties that meet or exceed this, 7 of them are paying a poll supplement. As you can see, Beaufort County is one of the 2 that is not. And yet we are the second ranked highest by per capita income. Now, I mentioned recruitment and retention challenges. Up to this point, we focused primarily on the compensation, the pay issue. But there are a number of other factors that are contributing to this issue also. One of them is a training time commitment. I mentioned that every poll worker has to attend a mandatory 2 to 3 hour training session prior to working the election. If they do not complete this training session, they cannot work the election. Now, we have a number of training sessions scheduled over a number of days at a variety of different times, trying to accommodate their schedules. However, there's always some that can't make these training schedules or these training meetings for whatever the case might be. It might be travel, might be illness. A lot of them are still in the workforce. To meet this, we have resorted in a couple of cases to a board member or 2 meeting with a handful of poll workers to walk them through the training in order to get them checked off so they're eligible to work that day. That's how critical the need is. I mentioned long hours at the polls. This could be a 13 to 14 hour day. Safety and security concerns continue to be asked. It's not unusual when we go in and check the poll locations on election day. People ask about security, they ask about safety, these kind of things. Again, if you look at the national landscape, this should not be a surprise. Our pool of active repeat workers is shrinking due to aging out. As I mentioned, a lot of our poll workers are approaching their 70s and early 80s. It's not as easy for them to do this anymore. County population growth was mentioned a little while ago in a previous presentation. This growth rate should not come as any surprise to any of us. As I mentioned, we've had a 33% increase in the number of precincts in Beaufort County this year, 95 to 126. This in and of itself adds to a huge increase in the need for additional poll workers. Beaufort County's per capita income also, surprisingly, is a detriment. It's one thing if you ask somebody to donate their time for 2 or 3 hours on any given day. Chances are they're more likely to do that. But when you look at them and say, we need you to work a 13 to 14-hour day starting at 6 a.m., you need a little bit more of an incentive thrown in to get them to agree to that. So, to that end, as I mentioned, this year we're expecting an extremely high turnout. In fact, we're expecting record numbers in November. Having enough poll workers to work all these poll locations and precincts is a critical need to ensure a smooth, efficient, and a timely voting process. Long lines and delays, in our eyes, are unacceptable. We want to have enough poll workers. We want to properly staff these precincts and polling locations so we can efficiently and effectively get these people in, have them cast their vote, and have them exit the precinct. To that end, we would like to pay an additional supplement to every poll worker of $100 per person. Now, as I mentioned, we anticipate needing about 800 poll workers, so we're looking at a request for about $80,000. This is just a little bit more detail in what I've already talked about. Currently, a poll manager is receiving $135, $60 for the mandatory training and $75 for the day. A $100 incentive or the supplement would take them to $235 for working the polls. Correspondingly, a poll clerk is at the $195 level. If we give them an additional $100 supplement, they'll be making $295 for working the polls. Now, we ask that you review this request and approve a fiscal year 24 supplemental budget appropriation to fund the supplemental pay for the poll workers as we have discussed. And as I mentioned earlier, we'd like to have further conversations with y'all regarding what Florence County and Sumter County are doing by having some type of schedule where county employees are able to work the polls also. This is a ready-made pool of potential poll workers, and we'd like to discuss trying to tap into that. Now, before we take any questions and answers, my colleague Matt Sweeney would like to make a 2-minute closing comment.
Hi, I'm Matt Sweeney, a fellow board member on the Board of Voter Registration and Elections. First, I want to commend the Board of Elections staff for successful presidential preference primary elections on February 3rd and 24th. Over a 30-day period, Marie and her staff ran 4 elections with overlapping early voting periods, so it was a big accomplishment. The staff operated with no sleep and a lot of strong coffee. We do have staff of about 12 people, and that's to serve 140,000 voters in Beaufort County. Once or twice a year, that staff count goes up to 500, and as Mr. Lucas said, it's going to be closer to 800 in November. And it's a very unique job. It's a one-day job. Once or twice a year, these 800 citizens show up, and they're expected to work perfectly, very high expectations to perform one day of excellent service, including servicing 60,000 customers, many of whom are very emotional on election day. They're expected to have flawless operation of devices that they might be using for the very first time. They have a very wide range of duties, everything from security to directing parking to resolving issues in the polling place. And they have to do that over a 14-hour workday with maybe just a few 10-minute breaks. So it's a very unique situation. These are essentially volunteers who work for the rest of the community. When I first got involved with the elections, I had a very idealistic perspective on this. I thought that people would be poll workers for the civic duty, to help their neighbors, and do the right thing. After all, we don't pay a living wage at $8 an hour to work the elections. It's not a living wage, so why pretend like we do? But as I got more involved, I realized that the stipend that these workers receive is a form of appreciation. And as Mr. Lucas pointed out, as the second highest per capita income in South Carolina, our citizens have very high opportunity costs for working the polls. Many of them are retired, so they value their leisure time. If they're not retired, they're working, and they have a very high income, so it's difficult for them to forego that. So we need to engage more than 400 new poll workers for the November election. And I support the work that Mr. Lucas and the Finance Committee has done. And on behalf of the rest of the Board of Elections, we'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
What questions can I or any member of our board answer for y'all at this point?
Mr. Chairman. So when you say 800 poll workers, but people who work early voting, they may be working 2, 3, 4 times, right?
All right, when I say 800, I'm talking about election day.
Yeah.
Early voting is a separate,
Yeah.
would be a,
But that's included in your 80,000?
no ma'am.
So how much is the real cost then? Because early voting's gotta be put in there, and I know there's quite a few people that do it.
The early voting workers, they usually earn about $100 a day.
But how many early voting workers are there that add to this $80,000 fee?
All of them, because all of them are poll workers. They just work the 2 weeks prior to the election. And on election day, they work on, at their polling place.
So they don't get paid to do early voting?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh.
They get paid $100 a day.
Okay, so your total ask is 80,000, which is perfectly reasonable. I think I agree with what you said. I think we need to pay more for our poll workers. People don't like to wait in line. People want to feel that it's a secure voting situation. I'm in Sun City and I've seen some long lines, and people want to know that we care enough in the county to provide a good polling service. So I'm in favor of this. I do want to ask, I like the 2 counties, Florence and Sumter, that allow their employees to take the day. I didn't see Mr. Robinson's face, so I don't know how that would impact us. But I mean, I think it's a great way to let people do, quote, their civic duty, be trusted employees, and not take a vacation day, and we might boost your poll workers. So I like that idea too. And Mr. Robinson didn't fall off his chair, so I guess.
Oh, he's up now.
What impact would that be? Well, if we allowed county employees to be poll workers and not take a vacation,
We have to do a little research on that and make sure that that's something we can
that
do.
we can do.
I was just doing some research on that before, but I'm not gonna answer yet.
That's okay.
But there's potential.
Yeah, good.
So you were asking about the $80,000 cost and where that would come from. So as of a few weeks ago, when we started looking at this project, there was about $65,000 left in that personnel line item for poll workers. This last election put that negative. So it's negative about $47,000 right now. And that will come back when we get our state reimbursement for that. So we'll expect that to increase a little bit. We will probably have to supplement that from our payroll contingency, which we plan to do anyway. So after it all kind of settles out, we'll work with Marie and we'll make that account whole. So the addition of that $100 per poll worker really depends on the number of poll workers. And the last account or the last payment that was requested, and this must have been a special election, was 311 poll workers. And that wasn't the one from Friday, it was the previous one. So you can see what that cost would be over time, 311,000 or 311 employees plus or times that $100. So the short version here is that if we choose to support our poll workers with the additional $100, our next election is in June. So in June, we can support that dollars now from our payroll contingency. Doesn't even need a vote. That I can approve. Now, and I would request that for the 2025 budget year, that the budget from the voter registration board includes that new amount and the expectation of the number of elections that we have and the number of poll workers that are needed and some funds for probably a special election. But in the event that we have an additional special election, that's exactly why we created the payroll contingency account to make sure we can cover those as they come. So, and right now our payroll contingency account, our payroll contingency account should be a little north of $3.5 million with some money that we know is going to come out of there. So it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, is making sure we can take care of employees and as those needs arise. Did I get there?
Well, yeah, just question on my side, just trying to figure out these numbers. So if you're looking at $80,000 for 800 poll workers, obviously this year we had two of the primaries on
Yes.
different days. And then the election, the general election is going to occur after our fiscal year starts. So, and then next year is an off year. So obviously there's not as much money needed, but and I looked at your averages, and the average is around $50 for what most counties are paying if you're looking at what additional amounts are there. And then we mentioned, you asked about the having employees do that. Is that something we'd still pay them, or that they would be able to go work and we'd pay them their normal pay? I don't think we'd let them double dip and get paid as a poll worker plus also get paid their
No.
as a day off.
We can't do that. That would be illegal. We'd get in trouble. You can't pay an employee twice for working at the same time. So we could not do that.
Right.
We will do the research and see if there's an opportunity for for county employees to do that as an assignment for the day, perhaps. So I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes to
Is there,
either.
at this point, money for this upcoming fiscal year? We don't need anything through July 31st. We're looking at, for this fall, will be the first time we'd look at
It would, so the suggestion is to put that in the budget from the voter registration, to bring that forward in the budget for you to examine and approve as part of the budget. As far as this year, one election remaining, am I right? June?
June primary and then November.
Right. Well, our budget year is July, so we're only concerned about FY '24 right now. So we could fund the commitment for FY '24 right now from our payroll contingency, and part of that after the funds come back from the state will come from there, from the line item. So that's something just Marie can work with Denise and problem solve.
John,
Going into next year, it would be budget. Yes, sir.
I would just recommend, out of abundance of caution, asking for a motion and asking council to authorize this one-time pay. And then, of course, if council approves the budget, their budget with this money in it, it's taken care of. I would just recommend that for your safety.
So I'll make the motion
And
I'll second that.
to increase the pay by $100.
I'll second that.
that would just be for this upcoming
Through
primary
June.
in June.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
And just to confirm, Florence and Sumter counties that are allowing their county employees to work the polls, it's just another work day for them, not paying any additional supplements.
You know, the other thing to consider, Jasper County, it gave the 100 already. So, now, we're not doing retroactive, but we have an opportunity, if we take it to 100, we could steal some of their poll workers. Because they might live they might live closer to Beaufort County, like Sun
Oh, you're
City.
talking about Sun City.
I can't really comment on Jessica.
I'm just saying it's an opportunity,
Okay.
but we have the motion and we second it, so go for a vote.
Yeah, so the motion is to to give a $100 supplement to poll workers for the remaining fiscal year.
Right, yeah.
And that we will budget the $100 in the upcoming budget.
Well, can we just take one at a time, and if council wants to do the budget, they can do that?
That's
So-
later.
Well, that's later.
Yeah, just
We'll
wanted-
discuss that. We're only doing the $100 supplemental pay for the remaining fiscal
Fiscal
year,
year.
which includes the June primary.
That's the motion on the table.
All right, that's been seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing no more discussion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that would be approved. Now, is that something that we need to go to council, or is that something we have made a budget amendment here that
No,
is?
I'd like, it's not a budget amendment, but I'd like you to get the vote of council.
Okay, so that would then move to council.
And one other comment, I would like to congratulate you on all the data you did, because when I,
It's a team effort,
I'm
every one
sure,
of us.
but I think it's great. I'm looking at the map here, Low Country Supplements, a visual map.
Right.
It was good.
Okay.
Good info.
We had enough time.
Yeah, we're gonna get you to do all of our presentations from now on.
Thank you
You
for your
did a
time.
great job.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Appreciate you coming forward, being here today. All right, let's then move on.
Oh, ordinance.
And,
We're never gonna get through this.
well, we're not,
We're gonna have to postpone.
I hate to rush things. All right, let's move on to number 11.
At 12.
Or 12, excuse me, discussion of additional supplement pay for Beaufort, oh, no, it's in 12. Recommend approval of first reading of an ordinance amended Chapter 66 Taxation, Article 5 Hospitality Tax of Beaufort County Code of Ordinances. And Mr. Brian Hulbert, Brian, if you could go ahead and kind of let us know, and obviously we'll have to look at the agenda to see what we have here for time, so,
Yeah, we may have to postpone the votes on
This
another
time.
okay.
It's too
But
soon.
Yes, sir. I gave a new version of the local hospitality tax to each member that you have at your table there, and that'll be up on the screen as well. And what we're doing is some housekeeping matters to make our local ordinance match what the state law provides. In 2020, the state made amendments to the state statute, and we're adding in the language to there. And while we do that, we're going to do some housekeeping to make our language match the state as much as possible. The first change is that under the definitions, I'm removing paragraph B, which is the paragraph that imposes the local hospitality tax. That has no place to be in a definition paragraph. So I'm moving that down to the payment of hospitality tax as the first paragraph in the next section, 66-533. So you see that? And then I renumbered each of the paragraphs for 532 and 533 to make them match up. That make sense? Okay. And then, if you go to the permitted use of hospitality tax funds, I've cleaned up the authorized uses 1 through 6 to make that language match what the state says. That's why I took out the land acquisition and the river in those two paragraphs there. And then 7 and 8 are the new paragraphs the state added in 2020 that I'm adding to our local ordinance. And 7 is the control and repair of flooding and drainage within or on tourism-related lands or areas. And that's important, that is within or on tourism-related lands, okay? And 8 is the site preparation for items in the entire section, 1 through 7, including but not limited to demolition, repair, or construction. And it's important to note that the use of the money for paragraph 7 above, in paragraph C, if you look at that, the revenues must be expended exclusively on public works projects designed to eliminate or mitigate adverse effects of recurrent nuisance flooding, including that which is attributed to sea level rise, recurrent flooding, and such adverse effects include road closures, other transportation disruptions, stormwater drainage issues, and compromised public infrastructure. Okay, so that's what that new use can be for. It's got to be tourism-related lands for the public work projects of hospitality funds. Any questions on that? And then I'm renumbering paragraphs 5, okay, I'm sorry.
Wait, go ahead, Alice.
I'm just thinking of boat landings that may have been impacted by sea level rise.
Well, boat ramps are authorized under paragraph 4 there.
Okay, so, all right.
That's
so-
already been authorized. And although we took out river, if it's a beach area on the river or a boat landing, we can use hospitality funds.
Even if it's on quote a river rather than a beach.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's,
all
it
right.
says beach access. It doesn't say ocean beach. It says
No.
beach access.
Okay.
Oh, good.
Good.
Okay. Then 536 has been changed from 537. And if you look at 535, the new section 535, I'm just moving that up to where it naturally flows after the permitted uses. 535 is management of that. And I've cleaned up the language under paragraph A. I've taken that language out because I talked to Denise, and for this hospitality tax and local accommodations tax, she could find no reason why that was in there. We don't separate that money out there. We've not been using that to fund that account. So I've just taken that language out. And I've made it to where all hospitality funds will be allocated through the budget ordinance process. So that's quick and simple for hospitality tax. So if there's no questions.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve this, and I want to thank Brian for all the work he did on this. I know it was tedious.
This does have to go to council too.
Yes, it would have to go to
Yeah.
council for 3
I'll
readings.
second it.
It's second. Ms. Howard, all right, any more discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to moving this to council? See no objection, then let's move on. Brian, I think you're up here again.
I am.
Recommend approval of an ordinance appropriating, number 13, recommend approval of first reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 66 Taxation, Article 2, Accommodations Tax Board, Division 1, General and Division and number 2, Accommodations Tax, 3% tax. Mr. Holbert, go ahead.
Okay, so in this Exhibit A, I've put the state 2% local aid tax and our local 3% taxes together. The first part is the state 2% tax from the state language, and the second part is our local 3% tax. So there's two ordinances that we're dealing with together here. They flowed in the same articles, I kept them together. The first change that's occurring is that we're changing the name of the board to committee. The state refers to it as the State ATAC Advisory Committee, not a board. I'm not sure why we ever called it a board. So we're marrying up with the state language and where everybody else uses, and that's committee. Any questions on that? Okay. Then I've added in the state definitions under the state statute. And the key definitions there are cultural, hospitality, travel, and tourism. Cultural plays into one of your committee members have to represent the arts, historical preservation, museums, and festivals. Hospitality is very broad, and that's the lodging facilities, restaurants, attractions, recreational amenities, transportation facilities, services, and travel information and promotion entities. So that's going to be important as far as the membership of the committee. And then travel and tourism. Why is that important? Because a tourist is considered by TURC, the Tourism Expenditure Review Committee at the state level, and they oversee the state local 2% fund. A tourist is someone that travels 50 miles or more to the destination. So outside their community and travel 50 miles. And that's based on the state Parks and Rec and the federal parks definitions as well. That's where that comes from. Okay. The rest of it talks about the housing costs for rental. And then the main definition that was added, the new definition at the state level was workforce housing. And we've all talked about that for the past 8 or 9 months ad nauseum. You're pretty familiar with that. But what's important there is the definition of workforce housing at the state level for state aid tax and local aid tax is the same. And it's someone whose income falls within 30% and 120% of the median income for the local area. And the question is going to be, what's the local area? Is it Beaufort County? Is it Hilton Heads for Hilton Head and North of the Broad for North of the Broad? But the local area, that's the median to be used for workforce housing. Okay, so what changes did I add? The next section in committee membership. There's been some question as to how many members have to be on the committee. Well, the state says 7 members, not 5, 7. And a majority of those 7 members have to come from the hospitality community. And that's why I gave you the definition as far as the hotels, the lodging, the bars and restaurants, how broad it was there. And it says that a minimum of those majority, at least 4 members, have to come from the lodging industry. So hotels, short-term rentals, that kind of area, the lodging, okay? Up to 2 members can be at large, but 1 member has to be representing the cultural. And that's why I gave that definition of culture before, as far as the arts, historical preservation, museums, and festivals. So one of the members have to represent those. And then what's important is something that I think's been overlooked, and it wasn't in our local ordinance before for the state aid tax, and that is number 4 under section 28. Members shall represent the geographic area where the majority of the revenue is derived. So the membership should come from the rural Beaufort County area, which is where our revenue for state aid tax
Unincorporated,
comes from.
Anywhere unincorporated,
Yes, ma'am.
so like they'd have to live on Fripp or Harbor or,
Yep, Data,
yeah.
Kefusky, those kind of areas, okay? So that's where the membership should come from. Okay, meetings, they have to meet at least once a year, and they have to make recommendations to council at least once a year. So as many meetings as it takes to make at least one recommendation to council. Now, it can be more meetings, and it can be more recommendations, but they have to meet the minimum of making recommendations once a year, because keep in mind, the funds have to be spent within the first 2 years most of the time. Okay, the powers and duties, that's just housekeeping to make it match with the state language. But if you look at paragraph 3A under section 30 there, powers and duties, I changed it from August to September for when the committees report to the finance committee, okay? There's only one committee meeting in August. It's easier to do it in the 2 meetings in September is what everybody agreed upon. Okay, I took out the last paragraph. That just doesn't come from the state, so that didn't belong there. Under 4B, the funds can be used to provide additional county services. I think we're familiar with that. That just matches up the language there. That means we can use it to pay for police and stuff like that for the portion that relates to have to serve the tourists. So if we have tourists and it requires more police presence, we can pay for it with the state aid tax funds. Okay, number 9 under paragraph B is the key one for development of workforce housing that we've been talking about for the last 9 months. You're all familiar with that. Are there any questions on the workforce housing that you want me to go over? Okay,
We're doing our own study of that, right?
that's a housing impact analysis that
Yeah.
we're gonna be working on. Tom's working with staff to get that going there. And that's a different section that'll be in
Yeah,
there.
we're getting it going right now. In fact, I've been having conversations with Ms. Hawkins.
I have one quick question. Since we don't know what it means by local area, maybe could we write the AG and get an AG opinion on how we define local area?
I think we would be safe to use the local area as far as the rural Beaufort area. So Beaufort County will operate under the presumption of our local area is rural Beaufort County, because that's where our funds are gonna be expended. Unincorporated.
Oh, I'm fine with that. I just, you know.
That's,
yeah,
if we keep
You
it,
mentioned Hilton Head, I was like,
Hilton Head would want to keep it to the local Hilton Head area.
Yeah,
But we're not talking about their funds, we're talking about outside there, so north
Okay.
of Broad, south of Broad, for those areas.
okay.
Okay. Now, it's important to know that there's a 2 years requirement to expend the money, but council can decide to ask for an extension of 1 year from Turk. If they vote on it and send it up and Turk approves that, then most of our funds can be extended for a year. But paragraph C2 allows for, if there's a 2/3 vote of the entire body of council, so 8 of 11 vote, you can extend it beyond the 2 years if you're gonna dedicate it to workforce housing, beach renourishment, or waterfront erosion. So if you dedicate it to those purposes, if we have funds left over that aren't gonna be spent within those 2 years, you can vote by 2/3 vote of the entire body of council to extend it past that and dedicate it to those 3 purposes, okay? That's what the purpose of C2 is.
So that's very limited.
Those 3
categories.
purposes. And you have to report annually to Turk as far as the money in the account, what progress you've made, any expenditures you've made in that regards. So Turk will have oversight of all that money that you dedicate for those 3 purposes beyond the 2 years.
Let me ask another, let me ask this question, Ryan. What happens, what can be done in the case of, funds being allocated, in a timely manner, but because of the, COVID situation, funds could not be utilized because of that? Is there any salvation in that at all at this time?
Not that has been made aware of this, but you do have the built-in protection of that extra year where council can decide that, all right, they didn't get the money spent within those 2 years. So for those funds, for those purposes that have been obligated, we're going to ask to extend it for a year, ask Turk for it, and they've been pretty lenient in granting that.
How do you go through that process?
Someone report that the finance department would be made aware that they couldn't spend that money, we weren't gonna meet that obligation, they'd come to council, you'd make a motion to approve it. We send it up to Turk, they review it, and take action to either approve it or deny it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay, then, the most important section is next page, Sarah. Paragraph D. This is in the state statute, but, go up, there you go, up, there you go. I've added that to our local state ordinance. In the expenditure of these funds, the county is required to promote tourism and make tourism-related expenditures primarily in the geographical areas of the county in which the proceeds of the taxes are collected where it is practical. This is the basis of Ms. Tabernick's decision to review each of the applications in the next section under 14 for each grant that's been awarded. This is the basis of her opinion, is why she's concerned as far as those awards. It comes from the state law where it says the money should be spent where it's collected, where it's practical. Any questions on that? No. Okay. The next one is the housing impact analysis that's required, that we're working towards getting that. We'll get the housing impact analysis back. We'll have the ordinance changed in the comprehensive plan where you can start to appropriate and have that money use that money for workforce housing. Okay, and that's straight out of the state statute. The language is copied right from there. So that ends it for the state 2% tax aspect. Any questions on that before we move to local tax? Okay, so 6641 begins the local accommodations tax. That's our 3% tax. The definition under 6642, paragraph C, is workforce housing. The exact same definition used in the state 2% tax. Same standard as far as 30% and 120% for the median income to be used. And again, it's important to note that it's workforce housing, not affordable housing. The standard here is workforce housing. Okay. Paragraph C, the one that's lined out there, I've taken that out because that is the imposition of the tax. It doesn't belong in the definitions. So I've moved it down to 6643, the next paragraph, make it the first one. That's where we impose that 3% tax. That's the more appropriate place for the imposition of the tax. Okay? And then I've renumbered each of those paragraphs accordingly. Paragraph D, the new paragraph D, I've just made that language read exactly as the state statute says. For paragraph E, that's new language, and that's taken from the state tax. And it says that the local accommodations tax must be kept in a separate fund segregated from the general fund, and all the interest earned on that local tax has to go back into that special fund for local aid tax. That's going to the same account, any interest earned. Okay, permitted uses of the taxes. I've cleaned that language up under 1 through 6 to make that language match the state statute. That's housekeeping matters there. It's important to note that 2 is tourism-related cultural, recreational, historic facilities. So it's got to be tourism-related when we use that. Number 7 is the new definition that they added for the use. That's the workforce housing that we talked about, same as in the state aid tax. The difference here is you don't have to have that housing impact analysis prior to using the local 3%. You can use that without that local impact analysis. And then paragraph 9, I've deleted that because that's not part of the state statute. That was just superfluous language that was in our local ordinance. There's no purpose for it. The only things we can expend the money on are 1 through 8 that the state has authorized us to spend the money on. So it's got to meet one of those criteria. You'll see that I've renumbered 45 to 46 and 46 to 47, and that's because on the next page, under 6647, I renumbered that to 45 to move that up to naturally flow from the permitted uses to where this is the management of the fund. So it just flows more natural there. Now, this is an important section for discussion for the committee and for council, because what we're recommending doing here, we're not recommending, but the request was made to delete all of paragraph A and B, and that is where you're awarding by ordinance the amounts to the designated marketing organizations, the Greater Beaufort Port Royal Convention and Visitor Bureau, and the Hilton Head Bluffton Chamber of Commerce annually from the local aid tax funds. That's not required by state law. That's just something that was in the local ordinance, and the request was made to remove that and the $50,000 to the Beaufort County Black Chamber of Commerce as having no place to be part of the ordinance here. Doesn't mean they can't apply for it, but they don't want it to be automatic where it's going into there. So the recommendation is to remove paragraphs A and B and make paragraph C the new paragraph A. And I have made that first section read similar to the state statute. Well, no, what I've done is, the request was made as far as the emergency fund, and the discussion was, should there be a cap on that emergency fund? So the first 20% goes to the emergency fund, but we're capping it at $1 million. So once that fund, emergency fund reaches $1 million, we don't put any more money in there until it falls below that $1 million cap. And then we can contribute the 20% till it reaches the $1 million cap again. So that's what the first paragraph is. The second one is the remaining 80%, or if it's capped at $1 million, that 100% can be used however you want, related to the authorized purposes in the previous section. So you let the county use the funds for any authorized purpose there, and we've taken away the automatic participation for the 20% river beach access under the previous paragraph 2, and the 60% for tourism-related building. We've taken that out. So now it's going to be, as I said, 20% to the emergency fund until it reaches $1 million, and the rest into just a general local aid tax fund for any purpose authorized by the ordinance and state law.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The old version, does anybody know the history on why we did that 20%, 60%? I don't.
I don't know the history, no, we don't.
Okay. It was just in our local ordinance that way.
That was it. It was just something that a previous council decided to put in the ordinance.
Do you know, Councilman Dobson?
It's been there forever.
2005.
And then the emergency money, I'm assuming would be like if we had a hurricane, something like that, it would be emergency money for tourism.
You could do the advertising saying, hey, we're open for business, or you could say, hey, we have to fix this boat ramp that was damaged by the hurricane, whatever the case may be, that's an emergency basis, it would take care of it.
Thank you.
Okay. And then, because paragraph B, we've deleted the allocations to the local DMOs, there's no reason for paragraph D, and then E just wasn't necessary. And I've made it to where this ordinance would be approved upon the approval of council, it would take effect. Now, you may or may not want to keep it to where it's approved, it's effective upon approval. And I say that because you may want to give the chambers some notice as far as, hey, you're not getting this automatic money anymore from local aid tax, so that's a reduction in what you might have planned to budget. And I'm not sure what that period is, but that's for discussion with council. I need guidance from council.
Yeah, well, this has to go for 3 readings.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Then we can have that discussion with them.
Right. Okay, any questions on the state or the local aid tax?
We appreciate the hard work on this, Brian.
All right, so this has to go, if we approve to send this to county council, it has to go through 3 readings. Is there any more discussion? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion to move it to council, seconded. Any more discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, we will then move this to county council. Thank you, Brian, great job.
Really good job.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, for item number 14, I move to postpone the action or any action to be taken on this until the next finance committee.
I'd like to second that.
All right, and so it's, motion has been made, it's been seconded. Any discussion on that?
I think that's a good move.
Yeah.
To postpone.
Well, yeah, because
At this
I
point.
think
At this point.
what was explained to me was gonna happen is either we probably had 3 options. One would be either to accept it as it is and push it back to council. It would be to take a, 15% cut across the board on everything, or go through them line item by line item. And I think that it sounded like there was a consensus that we were gonna go through them by line item, so, yes, sir.
I was asked to come and speak as the chair of that committee.
Okay.
Sorry, if I'd have known, I wouldn't have sat here for the last 2 hours, although it was fascinating to hear.
Well, we didn't know it was gonna happen. Go ahead.
I guess the other alternative would be the way the state statute works. The money's already there for the 150,000. The recommendation that the committee made back to finance is you already have the 15%. If you just release that 15%, then the county can put forth an application, and then the committee can review the application and recommend those funds back. So the $150,000 there, and then move forward with the awards that have already been granted or recommended on, and finance committee would have to move that back before council. Because really you have the $1 million already been approved by finance, well, last year. but then you still have the $150,000 from rollover carryover funds. So really, you don't have to change your ordinance. All you need to do is send the already grants that have been read and applied and recommended by the committee, send that back to council. And then the second is, if Finance Committee wants to approve the $150,000 that is also available in the county's budget, then give that back to the ATAX committee, and then we can just review the application, bring it back next Finance Committee or whenever, and recommend it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kevin.
So council, several, probably months ago, embarked on an alternative route, and that is they left these funds, this money, this $1 million alone, and they adopted, actually there's a third reading tonight, allocating 15% of the state ATAX for workforce housing. So they've already carved that issue out of out of this issue.
So here's the challenge. This is what I was trying to explain to the finance team, is you have a written process, and the written process says application windows open X day and closes X date, and then all those applicants come in. You're circumventing your own process and the state process if you go back and say, well, the county now wants to put its own application in, even though the application window is closed. And you still have the 15% available of the state ATAX in the budget if you wanted to. Listen, as I said when I spoke back in December, I think everybody in the hospitality industry agrees that workforce housing is desperately needed and we would support it. So the funds are still available and still there. So you can still move both items forward, which is a win-win for everyone.
This is not germane to what we're
All right, so,
discussing, which is the postponement
I think
of this.
what you missed was, we looked at your committee's recommendations.
Yes, ma'am.
So our first concern was there weren't 7 members on that committee. The second concern was only 4 came to the meeting, and on several of the items, only 3 voted. But our concern is, and you just heard Brian talk about, these funds are generated in unincorporated Beaufort, and when possible, should be spent in unincorporated Beaufort. Of your 37 items, at least half are not in unincorporated Beaufort. So the point was, we wanted to bring this to the next finance to vote on each one individually. Look at your recommendation, look at what they requested, we all got the Dropbox, and then decide if we agree with the recommendation or wish to alter it. That's what's on the table.
No, what's on the table is postponing this discussion
To do
to
that.
the next meeting. That's what's on the table, nothing else.
Forget workforce housing right now.
Okay, I didn't understand that. Thank you for clarifying that. And I heard Brian's presentation. So the new statute, even through workforce housing, defines the county as the geographic boundaries of the county, not just carve out unincorporated only, right? I would caution you against that. Having served on the city of Beaufort's ATAX and having served and now chair the county's ATAX, all the municipalities contribute to unincorporated events as well. You could be putting yourself in a position where now everybody's gonna start funding their own. I think the reality is, and the way that these things all serve one another is, you don't have enough lodging just in the county, you don't have enough lodging just in the municipalities, and you don't have enough event space in all those separately either, right? So they all have to cohabitate concurrently and together and be supportive within Beaufort County as a whole, which really contributes to Team Beaufort County. I mean, that's what it's all about. And I feel like we're gonna start dividing up the baby and the pie a little bit, and that seems like a sad thing to do.
All right.
So.
And thank you for coming. So obviously we have a motion and a second to postpone this.
Yeah.
I think that's what people are looking to do at this point. Is there any objection to postponing it?
Yes, I do.
And I would also object to that, but obviously, is there any, then everyone else here would agree that we postpone this?
Yes, sir.
All right, so we have 2 objections, Mr. Glover and myself. And so the motion to postpone has been passed. So we're going to postpone it to the next Finance Committee meeting.
Mr. Chairman, let me say this. We have funding different organizations. Events are coming up pretty soon. We need 3 readings. So I'm just asking this body here to do what they can as quickly as they can, because people are waiting for funding.
I mean, the only thing else we could do would be do a special finance meeting before I think the 11th is the next, committee meeting and council meeting. That'd be in 2 weeks. We could do a special finance.
Asking you to do it because you gotta have 3 readings, before the funds are released.
All right, so let's look at doing a special finance meeting then, before that, whatever committee meeting that is, Sarah, on the 11th?
Maybe community services.
Community services, okay. And that will be the only thing that we tackle. Yes, we'll do it before. We'll adjust the times, all right. So, is there any objection to that? To amendment, all right, so then that has been moved then to the next, committee meeting before community services. We will have a finance meeting on March 11th, I think is the date I'm thinking on top of my head of what would be. All right, so let's now move on then to, our final 2 items, on our agenda. Hopefully these are pretty straightforward.
Yes.
And it would be number 15, recommend approval to execute a purchase of a bucket truck for traffic operations. Fiscal impact is $165,436,000. Is there a motion to do that?
I'll make the motion to buy the
Thank you,
bucket.
Ms. Howard, second. Ms. Tabernick, any objection to that? Seeing no objection, that will be moved forward. This is,
This is the forward.
yes, sir. Yep, that's one and done. And then the final item on our agenda is recommend approval of Cisco Enterprise Support Agreement renewal. Fiscal impact of $161,371 annually over the next 5 years. And that is for funding for IT system maintenance budget. Is there a motion to?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second that.
All right, any more discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, this will be moved forward to county council.
Yes.
And then the final is boards and commissions. And boards and commissions, we have 2 recommended approvals. Recommend approval, and we'll take these both at the same time unless someone wants to separate these out. Recommend approval of reappointment of Bruce Donoff to the Beaufort County Board of Assessment Appeals for a 4-year term with the expiration date of February 2028 on District 8, term to be served 3/3. And then the second one would be recommended approval of reappointment of Stephen Koch to the Beaufort County Board of Assessment Appeals for a 4-year term with the expiration date of February 2028 on District 8. Is there a motion to accept both of those board members?
I'll make the motion.
All right, Ms. Howard, and the second was Mr. Dawson. All right, any objection or any discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection?
No.
No objection, that has been approved and passed. We are at the end of our meeting. How much time, Mr. Cunningham? 5? All right, so we'll give it at least 5 minutes before the next committee meeting starts.
5 minutes, we should be able to do it.
We are adjourned.